What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Paul. I make videos about Japanese society, life, and culture from the viewpoint of a long-term foreign resident. I've been in Japan for 19 years. And today I'm going to tackle a question that I have alluded to in a few videos in the past, but never tackled directly. And I feel like the few videos I've made over the past couple of weeks, and in the light of President Joe Biden's recent comment about Japan, I figured that it's time to go after the question of, are the Japanese xenophobic? If you're not aware what Joe Biden actually said, he was talking about the issue of immigration apparently, and basically was claiming that Japan's economy is stagnant because of limited, restricted immigration, because the Japanese are xenophobic. He said it out loud. Not the greatest thing for a president to do when talking about an ally anyways, but I'm going to basically go over his comment and get into the layers of whether or not it's true that the Japanese are xenophobic. Now, if you watch my videos, you know that I typically talk about things from my own perspective, my opinion, and I share anecdotes to kind of back up what I'm saying. That's not really going to work with this topic, because this is the type of topic that my subjective experience is going to be so vastly different from anyone else's that it won't be of any use to anyone else, to be perfectly honest. So instead, this topic is going to be based on what I've read and research that I've seen into this topic. And if I sprinkle some anecdotes in there, it'll be just to kind of illustrate something that the research has talked about. Okay, let's start with Joe Biden's statement. Is it true that the Japanese have a very restrictive immigration policy? Yes. Is it true that there's been a lot of economic stagnation in Japan over the past few decades? Yes, those are both true. Is it true that the Japanese are xenophobic? Well, it isn't necessarily logical that it follows that the reason why Japan has limited immigration is because of xenophobia specifically. That's where we have to kind of peel back some layers and determine if that's the case or not. Of course, there are Japanese who are xenophobic. It'd be foolish to claim anything else. But the question is it fair to make some kind of giant mass generalization about the Japanese being xenophobic? And that is what we're going to be getting into. I'm going to be talking about two models that I've read about that have been used to kind of address this topic. Do Japanese accept foreigners or reject foreigners, or fearful of foreigners, i.e. xenophobia? And the two models are economic and one that's called the contact model. Now, let's look at the economic model first, because that makes the most sense, because it seems to directly coincide with what Joe Biden had to say. And as I mentioned, yeah, absolutely true that Japan has limited immigration. Absolutely true that economic stagnation is a real thing. But the xenophobic content, well, if you look at the polling and the voting and what Japanese people have said they want or don't want, as well as the policies that they have then enacted in terms of national government policies, it would appear that Japanese people, by and large, vote against having immigration. And so, case closed? Well, maybe it's because of xenophobia, but we have to consider the possibility that it could be for other reasons. What other reasons might there be? Well, contact theory, or contact model rather, is giving us the possibility that it's actually something else. Now, contact model basically breaks down into three layers. If you've had meaningful contact with foreigners, meaningful being defined as you have a family member who's a foreigner, you have a colleague who's a foreigner that you work with, you have a foreigner friend, or you have a foreigner in your circle or group for a hobby, like maybe you go hiking together, or you both play in a musical ensemble together. That's meaningful contact. Another layer is zero or next to zero contact. And then finally there's a limited contact, as in like casually on occasion. And it's that last one that has real implications for the tourist boom that's happening in Japan right now. And I'm going to talk about that at the end of the video, because that's kind of another topic, but I think a lot of people will be interested to know how the tourist industry or the tourist boom that's happening in Japan might affect attitudes towards foreigners. So the research in the contact model shows very clearly that the vast majority of Japanese have zero or next to zero contact with foreigners. All the people out in rural communities, etc., they're not encountering foreigners at all, much less in some kind of meaningful way. And so what ends up happening is you have the largest portion of the Japanese population essentially ambivalent towards foreigners. They don't think about foreigners in their daily life. There's no reason to. Basically, foreigners are not a part of their worldview, both figuratively and literally. And so it's not clear to me then that there is a huge group, a huge generalization that can be made that Japanese are xenophobic, that there's a whole bunch of people out there actively disliking and fearing and not wanting anything to do with foreigners. When I think it's much clearer that most people just don't think about foreigners at all, positively or negatively. But Paul, you say, they go ahead and vote against immigration, so it must mean they don't like foreigners. It's possible. Again, there are definitely some xenophobes. But is there another explanation? I believe there is one. And that explanation is another stereotypical fear of the Japanese people, a part of Japanese society that people often acknowledge is a real thing, and that is the fear of change. The fear of things being different, the fear of the uncertainty that comes with a new system or a new order. So, which is it? Is it fear of change that makes Japanese not want immigration, or is it xenophobia? I don't know the exact answer to that. If that research exists out there and you know of it, please comment below. And if you are a budding social scientist, hey, I just gave you a great research idea. Maybe look into that. But I'm inclined to believe that if you have the vast majority of people just not interested in foreigners either way, positively or negatively, and then they're asked to change a policy that will affect how their community or where they live is going to change, I have a hunch most are voting just for the status quo. Like, my life is fine, it is what it is, I don't want to change. And anecdotally, like anyone who's lived in Japan or spent time here knows that businesses, banks, bureaucracy, they're all doing incredibly antiquated processes just because that's how we've always done it. Japan absolutely fears change in many ways, and that is a real issue, obviously, but which is the bigger issue? Is it the fact that there's a fear of change or a fear of foreigners? I err to the side of fear of change. It's probably a mix for some people. There's probably some xenophobes out there who fear change, but again, it's not clear to me that there's a whole group or a generalization that can be made that like everyone's sitting out there being anti-foreigner. That doesn't really ring true, especially when we get into how attitudes change with meaningful contact. So again, having a foreign family member or having a foreign colleague, etc., basically means that the Japanese attitudes towards foreigners improve. Meaningful contact, by and large, the research shows, is going to make an approval of foreigners, more acceptance of foreigners, and more likelihood that they wouldn't mind the idea of having more foreigners in the society. An anecdote that I would add here for myself is I saw this progression with my Japanese family. Basically, before my wife was marrying me, they didn't think about foreigners. Foreigners weren't in any way, shape, or form a part of their worldview. And then when it came out that I was going to be marrying their niece or their cousin or whatever the relationship is, there was trepidation about this change, right? Is Paul going to take her away to America and then we won't see her very much because they're living there now, etc. But that morphed into, oh, he's just a member of the family. And am treated as such. And then that extended to much more positive attitudes towards other foreigners, like, Paul, go ahead and invite your friend to our thing. You know, the fireworks festival is coming up. We can save a few extra spots, and that kind of thing. So it went from ambivalence to acceptance. And I think that also is a fair indicator that, given the chance, Japanese are not any more xenophobic than anyone else. All right, so that leads us to the final part of the contact model, which is casual contact with foreigners, and how that could be affecting Japanese attitudes with this ongoing tourism boom. I will fill you in on that in just one moment, but I want to take a couple moments here to just shout out myself and say, yes, I have an Instagram account. I invite you to follow me over there. It's just xchapter, like the name of this channel. And it basically is photos and videos from my life that aren't really related to the YouTube channel. So if you want to see more of a slice of my life here in Japan that's not as scripted as these videos are, then I invite you to follow xchapter on Instagram. I also have a Facebook page that I'm reviving recently. I'm trying to get a little bit better about the rest of my social media. Feel free to follow me there as well. There you'll get announcements about upcoming videos, so you can better decide if you want to watch a particular video or not. Of course, you should subscribe here, and with that, you'll get my videos suggested to you. You know, hit the bell notification so you get all notifications. And finally, I invite you to check out my podcast, The Journal of Japan Journeys. It is basically me interviewing other long-term foreign residents in Japan. They tell their stories about why they've come to Japan and why they made it their forever home. I'm trying to get a variety of people with different backgrounds that are in different jobs. So far, I've interviewed 6 people, 3 Americans, 1 Nigerian, 1 Chinese, and 1 person who is from Hong Kong but has actually taken official Japanese citizenship. I'm in the midst of editing an episode right now with a gentleman from Taiwan, so please look for that. Okay, so what does casual contact have to do with the foreign tourism? Well, it turns out that if you have casual contact where you're just running into foreigners but it's not reaching any kind of meaningful level, can actually lead to negative feelings about foreigners. And the finding isn't as robust as meaningful contact leads to good feelings. I mean, that was pretty clearly the case. This is not as drastic a change, but the evidence shows that it can happen, that the casual contact will lead to some negative thoughts about foreign people. And what that tells me as a resident here, if you're coming to Japan as a tourist, just behave like a good human being. You know, don't litter, don't trespass, don't, try to touch the geisha, like, just behave in how you would want to behave around your friends and family and neighbors back home. And when in doubt, watch what the natives do and follow their example. All I ask and all we ask is, be polite, be respectful when you visit Japan. And I know the vast majority of you are. And if you're watching this channel, you're obviously interested enough in Japan that you're probably not going to ever be in danger of disrespecting the Japanese. So I thank you for that. And I also thank you for watching this particular video. That's all I have to say about it today. I will admit to being a little bit nervous about releasing this video because it's a pretty touchy subject, and I don't know, let's keep it civil in the comments, please. If you want to come at me with all kinds of anecdotal evidence of how the Japanese are totally xenophobic, I mean, I'm interested in hearing your stories, but I'm even more interested if you have some research or evidence that, could push back at what my current belief is that I've laid out today. Either way, thanks for watching this video, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.